The rope was fraying, thread by thread, as Isabella Hart's manicured fingers slipped another inch down the cliff face. Below her, a 500-foot drop promised certain death. Above her, a stranger's weathered hands reached down, hands belonging to a man who had every reason to let the rich fall. "Please," she gasped, her billion-dollar empire meaning nothing against gravity's pull. Eli Thompson hesitated for just a heartbeat, remembering his foreclosure notice that morning. Then he grabbed her wrist. What happened next would change both their worlds forever. Stay with me to discover how a dying farm and a corporate empire collided on this cliff's edge. Comment below which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The morning sun cast long shadows across Cedar Valley as Eli Thompson stood in what used to be his cornfield. The stalks, once proud and green, now stood like brittle skeletons against the dawn sky. He crushed a handful of dry soil between his fingers, watching it fall like sand through the cracks. 4 generations of Thompsons had worked this land, and it looked like he'd be the one to lose it all. "Daddy?" His daughter Mia's voice drifted from the farmhouse porch. At 16, she had her mother's eyes, the same eyes that had closed forever 3 years ago when cancer took Sarah away. "You coming in for breakfast?" "Be right there, sweetheart," Eli called back, though they both knew breakfast meant yesterday's bread and the last of their preserves. The refrigerator had been empty for 2 days now, and his pride wouldn't let him use their remaining $20 for anything but Mia's school supplies. Eli walked back toward the house, his boots leaving prints in the dust that used to be fertile soil. The drought had been merciless this year, the 4th bad year in a row. Each morning, he woke hoping for clouds, for even a hint of rain, but the sky remained stubbornly, cruelly blue. "Mail came," Mia said softly, handing him an envelope with the First National Bank logo. They both knew what it contained without opening it: the final foreclosure notice. 30 days to pay $40,000 or lose everything. Eli's hands trembled slightly as he set the envelope on the kitchen table, unopened. "How was school yesterday?" "Fine," Mia lied. He knew the other kids had been talking. Everyone in Cedar Valley knew the Thompson farm was failing. In a small farming community, gossip traveled faster than wildfire. "Your SAT prep class is tomorrow," he reminded her. "Mrs. Henderson said you're doing real well in math." "Dad, we can't afford—" "You're going to college, Mia. That's not negotiable." His voice carried the same determination that had kept him working 18-hour days, that had him selling his truck, his father's watch, anything that wasn't nailed down. Everything except the land. Never the land. "What about you?" she asked, her eyes glistening. "What happens to you if I leave?" Before he could answer, a sound pierced the morning air, a scream, high and desperate, carried on the wind from the direction of Devil's Drop, the cliff that marked the eastern boundary of his property. Eli was running before his mind fully processed what he'd heard. His long legs ate up the distance, boots pounding against the hard-packed earth. The scream came again, closer now, filled with a terror that made his blood run cold. He'd heard that kind of scream only once before, the night Sarah had collapsed, the cancer finally winning its war. He burst through the tree line and skidded to a stop at the cliff's edge. His heart hammered against his ribs as he looked down. There, about 6 feet below the edge, a woman clung to a narrow outcropping of rock. Her fingers were white with strain, her expensive-looking riding clothes torn and dirty. A riding helmet lay cracked on a ledge beside her, and blood trickled from a gash on her forehead. "Help me!" she cried out, her voice raw with panic. "Please, I can't hold on much longer." Eli dropped to his stomach immediately, reaching down toward her. But she was too far. His arms couldn't bridge the gap. He needed rope, and he needed it now. Racing back to where he'd left his work supplies near the fence line, he grabbed the old rope he used for hauling equipment. It was worn, frayed in places, but it was all he had. "I'm coming back," he shouted to the woman. "Hold on. Please hurry." Her voice cracked with exhaustion. "My hands. I can't feel my hands anymore." Eli tied one end of the rope around the sturdiest tree near the cliff edge, an old oak that had weathered 100 storms. He tested it twice with his full weight, then fashioned a loop at the other end. Laying flat again, he lowered the rope down to her. "Put the loop under your arms," he instructed. "Wrap it around yourself." The woman's face was pale with fear, her dark hair whipping around her face in the wind that always howled at the cliff. She looked to be in her early 30s, with features that seemed oddly familiar, though Eli couldn't place where he might have seen her before. Her eyes, a striking green, met his with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. I can't let go, she gasped. If I let go, you have to trust me, Eli said firmly, using the same voice he'd used to calm spooked horses. I'm going to pull you up, but you need to get that rope around you first. Can you hook it with your elbow? She managed to snag the rope with her right elbow, crying out as the movement shifted her weight. For a heart-stopping moment, her left hand slipped, and she dangled by just her right hand's grip. Now or never, Eli shouted. Let go and grab the rope. I've got you. With a cry that was part fear, part determination, Isabella released the rock and grabbed the rope with both hands. Eli immediately began pulling, his muscles straining against her weight. Years of farm work had made him strong, but the angle was awkward, and the rope bit into his palms. That's it, he encouraged as she got the loop around her torso. Now hold tight. Inch by inch, he hauled her up. The rope creaked ominously, some of the frayed sections stretching thin. His shoulders burned, his back screamed in protest, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Finally, when she was close enough, he reached down and grabbed her arms directly, pulling her up and over the edge in one final heave. They both collapsed on the ground, breathing hard. The woman was shaking violently, her entire body trembling from the ordeal. Eli noticed her riding boots were custom-made, Italian leather, if he had to guess. Her watch, though scratched now, looked like it cost more than his truck had. Thank you, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Thank you so much. You saved my life. Eli sat up, examining her injuries with practiced eyes. The cut on her forehead had stopped bleeding, but would need cleaning. Her palms were raw and bloody from gripping the rock. We need to get you to a hospital. That head wound. No hospitals, she said quickly, then seemed to catch herself. I mean, I'm fine. Really, just some scratches. Ma'am, you might have a concussion. That's not something to mess around with. Eli stood and offered her his hand. Come on, my house isn't far. We can at least clean those wounds and call someone for you. She accepted his hand, wincing as she stood. Isabella, she said softly. Isabella Hart. Eli Thompson. He steadied her as she swayed slightly. Can you walk? I think so. She took a tentative step, then another. My horse, she got spooked by a snake. Threw me right near the edge, and when I tried to get up, the ground gave way. Eli looked around but saw no sign of a horse. She probably headed back to wherever you're staying. Horses are smart that way. Where are you visiting from? Isabella hesitated just a fraction of a second. New York. I'm here on business, staying at the Grandview Resort. The Grandview was the fanciest place within 100 miles, a playground for wealthy tourists who came to experience authentic rural life from the comfort of their luxury suites. Eli had done some repair work there once, years ago, when times weren't so desperate. They walked slowly back to the farmhouse, Isabella leaning on him more heavily than she probably realized. As they emerged from the trees, Eli saw Mia standing on the porch, worry creasing her young face. Dad! I heard shouting. She stopped short, taking in the injured woman. Mia, get the first aid kit, Eli instructed, and boil some water. His daughter disappeared inside without question, though Eli saw her curious glance at Isabella's expensive clothes. They helped Isabella to the porch steps, where she sat down heavily. This is beautiful land, Isabella said, looking out over the dying fields. Something flickered in her expression. Sadness, maybe, or recognition. It was, Eli replied quietly. The drought's been hard on everyone in Cedar Valley. How long have you farmed here? My family's been on this land since 1887. My great-great-grandfather claimed it, built the original farmhouse. He pointed to the stone foundation visible beneath the current structure. Every generation added something. My grandfather put in the barn, my father expanded the fields. He trailed off. You what? Isabella prompted gently. I'm probably going to be the one who loses it all. The words came out before he could stop them, bitter and tired. Mia returned with the first aid kit and a bowl of warm water. She worked quietly alongside her father, cleaning Isabella's wounds with gentle efficiency. Sarah had taught them both basic first aid, insisting they know how to take care of themselves and others. "There," Mia said, applying the last bandage to Isabella's palms. "Those should heal pretty quick if you keep them clean." "Thank you," Isabella said, studying the girl with interest. "You're very skilled. Planning to be a doctor?" Mia's face lit up. "Actually, I want to be a veterinarian. I love animals, and there's a real need for large animal vets in farming communities." "She's got the grades for it too," Eli added proudly. "Straight A's, top of her class." "College must be expensive," Isabella observed carefully. The light in Mia's eyes dimmed slightly. "We'll figure it out." An awkward silence fell over the porch. Isabella stood, testing her balance. "I should go. I've imposed enough on your hospitality." "You haven't imposed at all," Eli said. "But you really should see a doctor about that head injury." "I will," she promised, though something in her tone suggested otherwise. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a money clip thick with $100 bills. "Please, let me No." Eli's voice was firm, almost harsh. "We don't take payment for doing what's right." "But you saved my life, Sits, and I'd do it again tomorrow. No payment needed." His jaw was set in a way Mia recognized, the Thompson pride that was both their strength and their curse. "That's not how we do things here." Isabella looked between father and daughter, something unreadable passing over her features. "Then thank you, both of you." She pulled out her phone, presumably to call for a ride, then frowned. "No signal." "Yeah, coverage is spotty out here," Eli said. "I can drive you back to the Grandview." "Dad, the truck's not—" Mia started, then stopped at his warning look. "I'll walk with you to the main road," Eli offered instead. "You can get signal there. Call the resort." The walk took 20 minutes, Isabella moving slowly but steadily. They talked little, but Eli noticed how her eyes took in everything: the dead crops, the peeling paint on the few buildings they passed, the foreclosure notices posted on 2 other farms. "This is happening everywhere?" she asked quietly. "The whole valley. Drought's been going on 4 years now. Banks can't wait anymore, and neither can we." He kept his voice matter-of-fact, but Isabella heard the pain underneath. When they reached the main road, her phone finally found signal. Within minutes, a black SUV with tinted windows appeared, moving fast down the dusty road. The driver, a serious-looking man in a suit, jumped out and rushed to Isabella. "Miss Hart, we've been looking everywhere." "I'm fine, James," she cut him off, glancing meaningfully at Eli. "Just a riding accident." James looked like he wanted to say more, but caught her expression and simply opened the rear door for her. Isabella turned back to Eli. "Thank you again, Mr. Thompson. I won't forget this." "Just take care of that head wound," he said, tipping his worn baseball cap. As the SUV pulled away, Eli noticed James watching him in the rear-view mirror with an expression he couldn't quite read. He stood there for a moment, dust from the vehicle settling on his boots, then turned and began the long walk home. Mia was waiting on the porch, the unopened foreclosure notice still on the kitchen table where he'd left it. "Who was she, Dad?" "Really?" "Just someone who needed help," Eli replied, though something nagged at him about Isabella Hart. The name seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. Those clothes she was wearing, that watch. "Dad, she has money, real money, and she wanted to help. We don't take charity, Mia. It's not charity when you save someone's life. It's a thank you." Eli sat down heavily on the porch steps, suddenly feeling every one of his 43 years. "Your mother and I raised you to understand that integrity isn't something you sell, not for any price. We help people because it's right, not because we expect payment." "Mom would also want us to survive," Mia said softly, sitting down beside him. "She'd want me to go to college. She'd want you to save the farm." He put his arm around his daughter, pulling her close. "I know, sweetheart. I know." That night, Eli lay awake staring at the ceiling, running numbers in his head for the 1,000th time. $40,000 might as well have been 40 million. The cattle were gone, sold off one by one. The equipment was mortgaged. He had nothing left to sell except the land itself. and that would mean the end of everything his family had built. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Still no clouds, no hint of rain. He thought about Isabella Hart, about the terror in her eyes as she hung from that cliff. He'd done the right thing, he knew that. But part of him, a small, ashamed part, wondered if his pride would cost him everything. The next morning brought no relief. If anything, the sun seemed hotter, more punishing. Eli was up before dawn, walking the fence line, checking for breaks he couldn't afford to fix. That's when he saw it. A manila envelope tucked under a rock near the spot where he'd saved Isabella. Inside was a handwritten note. This isn't charity. It's an investment. Someone who risks everything to save a stranger deserves a chance to save himself. Please. The note was unsigned, but paper-clipped to it was a check for $50,000. Eli stared at the check, his hands shaking. It was enough to pay off the bank and have some left over for seeds, maybe even repairs to the irrigation system. It was salvation wrapped in a small piece of paper. He walked back to the house slowly, the check burning in his pocket. Mia had already left for school, catching the bus at dawn for the hour-long ride to the regional high school. The kitchen was empty, quiet, filled with the kind of silence that had haunted him since Sarah's death. He sat at the table and placed the check in front of him, next to the foreclosure notice he'd finally opened. 30 days. He had 30 days to decide between his pride and his legacy. His phone rang, a rare occurrence these days since he'd let the service lapse on everything but the most basic plan. The number was unknown. Hello? Mr. Thompson? This is Dr. James Mitchell from Cedar Valley Agricultural Extension. I'm calling about a new drought assistance program that your farm might qualify for. Eli frowned. I haven't heard about any new programs. It's just been approved. Very selective criteria. Could I come by this afternoon to discuss it? Something felt off, but Eli was desperate enough to listen to anything. I'll be here. After hanging up, he looked again at the check. $50,000. He walked to the old wood stove, lifted the metal plate, and held the check over the opening. All it would take was letting go, and his pride would remain intact. But Mia's college dreams, the farm, 4 generations of work, all of it would die with that pride. The check remained in his hand, unburned. Dr. Mitchell arrived at exactly 2 o'clock in a newer model pickup that didn't match his supposed government position. He was young, early 30s, with the kind of smooth hands that had never worked a field. Mr. Thompson, thank you for seeing me. His handshake was firm but practiced, like someone who'd learned it from a business seminar. They sat on the porch, and Mitchell pulled out a tablet, swiping through screens of data. Your farm has been selected for a pilot program. Drought-resistant crops, new irrigation technology, technical support, all provided at no cost. No cost, Eli repeated skeptically. Nothing's free, Dr. Mitchell. The program is funded by a private agricultural foundation. They're investing in farms they believe can be saved, turned into models for sustainable farming in drought conditions. And they picked me? Out of all the failing farms in Cedar Valley? Mitchell shifted slightly. Your farm has the right soil composition, the right positioning relative to the water table. It's technical, but essentially, yes, you're ideal for the program. Every instinct Eli had developed over 20 years of farming was screaming that something wasn't right. This was too convenient, too perfectly timed. What foundation? He asked. The Hart Agricultural Trust. Eli's blood ran cold. Hart. Isabella Hart. Never heard of it. They're new, based out of New York, very well funded, very committed to preserving American farmland. And if I say no? Mitchell seemed genuinely surprised. Why would you? Mr. Thompson, forgive my directness, but I've seen your financials. Without intervention, you'll lose this farm within the month. You've seen my financials. Mitchell colored slightly. Public records. The foreclosure filing. That was partially true, but it didn't explain how he knew the exact timeline. Eli stood. I need to think about it. Of course. Mitchell handed him a business card. But don't think too long. The foundation wants to begin implementation immediately. After Mitchell left, Eli walked to the eastern border of his property, to the cliff where he'd pulled Isabella from death's edge. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the dead fields gold. From here, he could see the entire valley, a patchwork of brown and dying green dotted with farmhouses that had sheltered families for over a century. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Please don't let pride kill what generations built. Some gifts aren't charity, they're justice. He deleted the message, but the words stayed with him. That evening, Mia came home excited, almost glowing. Dad, you won't believe what happened. What's wrong? His first thought was always worry now, a reflex born from losing Sarah. Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. She was practically bouncing. Mrs. Henderson called me into her office today. There's a scholarship, a full ride to State University for students from farming families affected by the drought. It covers everything: tuition, books, housing, even a meal plan. Eli's heart sank. Mia, I know what you're thinking, but I earned this. My grades, my essay about Mom and the farm. Mrs. Henderson said it was the strongest application she'd ever seen from Cedar Valley. What's the scholarship called? The Rural Futures Foundation. Dad, this is it. This is my chance. He hugged his daughter, feeling her joy even as suspicion gnawed at him. 2 programs, both perfectly timed, both offering exactly what they needed. Isabella Hart had been a billionaire. He'd finally placed the name. She owned one of the largest agricultural companies in the world, though she kept a low profile, rarely appearing in the media. That night, unable to sleep again, Eli made a decision. He drove his old truck to the Grandview Resort, parking in the service area to avoid attention from the valets. The night manager, Tom Bradley, was a high school classmate who'd chosen hospitality over farming. Eli Thompson, haven't seen you in years. What brings you out here? Tom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Isabella Hart, is she still here? Tom's expression shifted. I can't discuss guests, Eli. You know that. She's not just a guest, though, is she? She owns the place. Tom was quiet for a long moment. How did you know that? I didn't until just now. Eli ran his hand through his hair. Look, I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just need to know. Is she still here? She extended her stay. Indefinitely. Eli, what's this about? I pulled her off a cliff yesterday. Devil's drop. Tom's eyes widened. That was you? She came back pretty banged up. Had our doctor check her out. She didn't say who helped her. She's trying to help me, Tom. Programs, scholarships, money appearing out of nowhere. I think she's trying to save my farm. Would that be such a bad thing? Eli didn't answer. He left the resort and drove home through the dark, empty roads. The check was still on his kitchen table, uncashed, a $50,000 question mark. The next day, another envelope appeared at the gate. Inside was a single photograph. A young Isabella Hart, maybe 10 years old, standing with an older man in front of a farmhouse. The man wore overalls and a worn smile. On the back, someone had written, Isabella and Grandpa Hart, Miller's Farm, Kansas, 1999, 6 months before the bank took it. Eli studied the photo. The pain in the little girl's eyes was familiar. The same look Mia had when she thought he wasn't watching. The fear that everything she loved was about to disappear. He was still holding the photo when another vehicle pulled up, not Mitchell this time, but a convoy of trucks bearing the logo of Agricorp, Isabella Hart's company. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, all sharp edges and sharper smile. Mr. Thompson? I'm Richard Blackstone, Senior Vice President of Land Acquisition for Agricorp. Land acquisition, Eli repeated flatly. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer for your property, 3 times its current market value. It's not for sale. Mr. Thompson, please be realistic. Your farm is failing. We're offering you a way out with dignity and financial security. By selling to the same company whose owner is trying to save my farm. Blackstone's smile faltered. I'm not sure what you mean. Isabella Hart, your boss. She was here. Ms. Hart has no involvement in our acquisition strategies. She's occupied with other matters. The lie was obvious, but the implication was clear. Whatever Isabella was doing, her own company didn't know or approve. The answer is no, Eli said firmly. The offer won't remain open indefinitely. Once your farm goes into foreclosure, we'll acquire it from the bank for a fraction of what we're offering now. Then I guess you'll have to wait and see if that happens. Blackstone left, but not before making it clear that AgriCorp had its eyes on Cedar Valley. Eli called the number on Mitchell's card. "I'll take the program," he said without preamble. "The drought assistance." "When can we start?" Mitchell couldn't hide his relief. "Tomorrow, if you're ready. Mr. Thompson, you won't regret this." But Eli was already regretting it, even as he knew he had no choice. Pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. Teams of experts descended on the farm, taking soil samples, installing moisture sensors, setting up experimental irrigation systems that seemed to pull water from the air itself. The dying fields were plowed under and replanted with strange new seeds, drought-resistant varieties that Mitchell promised would thrive even in the harsh conditions. Mia threw herself into her scholarship applications, writing essays late into the night, preparing for interviews with a determination that reminded Eli painfully of Sarah. She never questioned the sudden turn in their fortunes, too grateful for the chance to pursue her dreams. But Eli questioned everything. He watched the workers, noting how they avoided his questions about who was funding all this. He saw the way they looked at him, with a mixture of pity and something else, respect maybe, or curiosity about why Isabella Hart had chosen to save this particular farm. One evening, as the sun set over fields that were finally showing the first hints of green, Eli stood where he'd saved Isabella. The cliff edge had been reinforced now, another improvement that had appeared overnight, credited to county safety initiatives that didn't exist. "You can't save everyone," he said to the wind. "You can't fix everything with money." But even as he said it, he watched his daughter in the distance, feeding the chickens with a smile he hadn't seen since before Sarah got sick. The farm was coming back to life, and with it, a hope he'd thought was dead forever. The check still sat on his kitchen table, uncashed. He'd decided to frame it, a reminder that sometimes salvation comes with a price that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with pride. 3 weeks after the planning, the first real test came. A massive storm system, the kind that had bypassed Cedar Valley for 4 years, suddenly shifted course. The weather services were calling it unexpected, unprecedented. Eli knew better. He'd seen the cloud-seeding plains, unmarked but flying in patterns that anyone who'd studied weather would recognize. The rain came at sunset, first a few drops, then a steady shower, then a downpour that had everyone in the valley standing outside, faces turned to the sky, some crying, some laughing, all disbelieving. Eli stood in his field, letting the water soak through his clothes, watching the new plants drink deeply. The irrigation system Mitchell's team had installed was capturing every drop, channeling it into underground reserves that would last for months. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Is it enough?" Isabella's voice was soft, uncertain. "You can't make it rain," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure anymore what Isabella Hart could or couldn't do. "No," she agreed, "but I can make sure that when it does rain, not a drop is wasted." "Eli, Mr. Thompson, I need to tell you something. You don't owe me any explanations. My grandfather lost his farm when I was 10. A drought, just like this one. The banks wouldn't wait, wouldn't extend the loans. He died 6 months later. They said it was a heart attack, but I knew better. He died of a broken heart." Eli was quiet, remembering the photograph. "I built AgriCorp to help farmers, to provide resources and technology to prevent what happened to him. But somewhere along the way, it became just another corporation, more interested in acquiring land than saving it. When you pulled me up from that cliff, when you refused the money, you reminded me why I started all this." "Isabella." "There's going to be a fight," she interrupted. "My board, the shareholders, they want Cedar Valley, all of it. They see struggling farms as opportunities for expansion. I'm trying to stop them, but I need time." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that what I'm doing, the programs, the assistance, it's not entirely legal, not by corporate standards. If they find out, they'll stop it all. They'll take your farm and every other farm in the valley." "Then why are you telling me?" "Because you saved my life without knowing who I was, without wanting anything in return. Because your daughter reminds me of myself at that age, Brilliant, determined, desperate for a chance, because sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. The line went dead. Eli stood in the rain for a long time, thinking about pride and survival, about gifts and debts, about the complicated ways lives intersect and change each other. The rain continued through the night, steady and life-giving. In the morning, Cedar Valley looked different, not saved, not yet, but no longer dying. The green shoots in Eli's fields pushed up through the wet soil, reaching for a sun that, for once, wasn't their enemy. The morning after the rain, Eli woke to find 3 black SUVs parked at his gate. Richard Blackstone stepped out of the lead vehicle, his expensive shoes immediately sinking into the mud. Behind him came a woman with sharp features and cold eyes, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Eli's monthly mortgage payment. "Mr. Thompson," Blackstone called out as Eli approached, "we need to discuss the irregular activities happening on your property." "Nothing irregular about farming," Eli replied, but his stomach tightened. They knew something. The woman stepped forward. "I'm Jennifer Cross, Senior Legal Counsel for AgriCorp. We've discovered that certain unauthorized resources have been diverted to your farm, resources that belong to our shareholders." "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Hart Agricultural Trust doesn't exist," Cross stated flatly. "It's a shell organization created 3 weeks ago, funded entirely through redirected AgriCorp assets. That's corporate fraud, Mr. Thompson, and you're a beneficiary." Mia appeared on the porch, still in her pajamas, concern written across her face. "Dad? What's going on?" "Go inside, sweetheart." "No," Cross interjected. "She should hear this too. The scholarship she received, also fraudulently funded. Every benefit your family has received in the past month is the result of criminal activity." Eli felt the ground shift beneath him, though this time it had nothing to do with rain-softened soil. "We didn't know." "Ignorance isn't a defense," Blackstone interrupted. "However, we're prepared to be reasonable. Sign over your farm to AgriCorp, and we'll ensure all legal matters disappear." "Your daughter keeps her scholarship. You receive a generous settlement. Everyone wins." "Everyone except the farmers who lose their land," Eli shot back. "They're losing it anyway," Cross said. "The only question is whether they lose it to the bank or to us. At least we're offering compensation." A car door slammed behind them. Isabella Hart stood beside a modest rental car, wearing jeans and a work shirt instead of her usual designer clothes. Her face was pale but determined. "That's enough, Jennifer." Cross turned slowly. "Miss Hart, the board is looking for you. You missed the emergency meeting, Swas." "I know exactly what meeting I missed." Isabella walked forward, positioning herself between the lawyers and Eli. "The one where you planned to steal Cedar Valley while I was conveniently unavailable." "Steal is a strong word," Blackstone said carefully. "We're making legal offers, using information gathered through my agricultural assistance program, targeting families you know are desperate." Isabella's voice was steady, but Eli could see her hand shaking slightly. "That wasn't the purpose of those programs." "The purpose of any corporate program is to benefit the corporation," Cross replied. "Something you seem to have forgotten." "The board has called for a vote of no confidence, Isabella. Your emotional decision-making has compromised your position." "When?" "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., New York headquarters." Cross smiled thinly. "Of course, if you were to support the Cedar Valley acquisition, demonstrate that you're still capable of making rational business decisions. You want me to choose between my position and these farms. We want you to remember who you work for," Blackstone said. "Your grandfather's sob story doesn't change the fact that you have a fiduciary duty to our shareholders." Isabella stood straighter. "Get off Mr. Thompson's property." "Now." "This isn't over," Cross warned. "Every dollar you've diverted, every fraudulent program, we have documentation. If you fight us on this, we'll bury you, and them." After they left, Isabella sagged against the porch railing. Mia brought her a glass of water, which she accepted gratefully. "Is it true?" Eli asked quietly. "The fraud accusations?" "Technically, yes." Isabella met his eyes. "I redirected funds from our land acquisition budget to create the assistance programs. In my defense, I am the CEO. Or was. Probably won't be after tomorrow. You're risking everything for a valley full of strangers? No, she said softly. I'm risking everything to finally do what's right. My grandfather would have wanted, he would have understood. Mia spoke up. What happens to our scholarship? The programs? Isabella's silence was answer enough. That evening, Eli called a meeting at the community center. Word had already spread through Cedar Valley like wildfire. Farmers comparing notes, realizing they'd all received mysterious assistance, all been approached by AgriCorp with offers that seemed too good to be true. The room was packed, families who'd worked adjacent lands for generations, competed at county fairs, helped each other through harvests and heartbreaks. Tom Morrison, whose farm bordered Eli's to the west, stood up first. So we're saying this woman, he gestured to Isabella, who sat in the back row, risked her whole career to help us. Why? Eli stood. Because 4 weeks ago she nearly died on my property. I pulled her up from Devil's Drop, and when I refused her money, she found another way to pay a debt she felt she owed. Debt? Agnes Wheeler, the valley's oldest resident at 93, spoke from her wheelchair. Saving a life doesn't create a debt, it creates a bond. Pretty words won't save our farms, Jack Carter interrupted. He'd been bitter since losing half his acreage the previous year. If what those lawyers said is true, we could all be implicated in fraud. Only if we took money knowing it was illegally obtained, Isabella said, standing. You didn't. The legal risk is entirely mine. Why should we trust you, Jack demanded. You run the same kind of company that's been buying up family farms for decades. You shouldn't trust me, Isabella admitted. I haven't earned it. But I'm asking you to let me try. Give me 48 hours. Let me go to New York, face the board. I might lose, but I might also find a way to make all of this legitimate. And if you lose, Tom asked, then at least the new irrigation systems are installed. The drought-resistant crops are planted. The rain came. She looked around the room. It's not salvation, but it's a fighting chance. That's more than you had a month ago. Old Agnes wheeled herself forward. My husband fought in Korea. He used to say that sometimes in war you don't get to choose your allies, just your enemies. AgriCorp is the enemy. This young woman is offering to fight. I say we let her. A vote was called. It wasn't unanimous. Jack and a few others dissented, but the majority agreed. Isabella would go to New York. They would wait. As the meeting broke up, Eli found Isabella standing outside, looking up at the stars. The sky had cleared after the rain, and the Milky Way was visible in all its glory, something you never saw in the city. It's beautiful, she said softly. You should see it during harvest moon. When I was a kid, my dad would wake us up just to look at it. Eli, if tomorrow goes badly, then we'll deal with tomorrow when it comes. He paused. Why didn't you tell me who you really were? Would you have let me help if you knew I was a billionaire CEO? He thought about it. Probably not. Your pride would have gotten in the way. Pride's all some of us have. Isabella turned to face him. No. You have this land. You have Mia. You have a community that voted to trust a stranger because you vouched for her. That's not pride, Eli. That's wealth that can't be measured in dollars. She left that night, driving toward the airport in her rental car. Eli watched the taillights disappear, then walked back to his truck where Mia was waiting. Do you think she'll win? His daughter asked. I don't know, but she'll fight. Sometimes that has to be enough. The next day, the entire valley seemed to hold its breath. Eli tried to work, but found himself checking his phone every few minutes. The new plants were thriving, the irrigation system humming along, but it all felt fragile, temporary. At noon, Mia called from school. Dad, it's on the news. The business channels are covering it. AgriCorp CEO faces board revolt. By evening, there was still no word. Eli was feeding the chickens when his phone finally rang. Unknown number. Eli? Isabella's voice was hoarse, exhausted. I need you to listen carefully. I lost the CEO position, but I negotiated something. It's complicated, but... The line crackled, went dead. Eli tried calling back, but got nothing. He was about to get in his truck and drive to the airport when headlights appeared on his road. Not SUVs this time, a whole convoy of vehicles, including news vans. Isabella stepped out of the lead car, looking haggard but triumphant. Behind her came a group of men and women in business suits, and surprisingly, old Agnes Wheeler in her wheelchair pushed by Tom Morrison. "What's going on?" Eli asked. Agnes grinned. "Your lady friend here did something clever. She couldn't win as CEO, so she quit. But first, she used her personal fortune, every penny of it, to create a legal trust. The Cedar Valley Agricultural Preservation Trust. It's ironclad, irreversible, and it now owns the development rights to every farm that wants to participate." Isabella took over, her voice stronger now. "The trust prevents any corporate acquisition for the next 100 years. Your farms can't be sold to developers or agricultural corporations. They can only be sold to other family farmers or passed down to heirs. But your fortune is now the trust's endowment. It will fund sustainable farming programs, scholarships, and emergency assistance for the next century." She managed a tired smile. "My grandfather would have loved the irony. The money I made from AgriCorp will now protect farms from companies like AgriCorp." Jack Carter pushed forward. "What's the catch?" "There's always a catch." "The catch," one of the suited men said, "is that participating farms must commit to sustainable practices. Crop rotation, water conservation, soil health monitoring. The trust provides support, but farmers must do their part." "So we'd have oversight?" Tom asked suspiciously. "You'd have partners," Isabella corrected. "Agricultural experts, scientists, people committed to making farming viable for the next generation. But all decisions remain with the landowners." Eli looked around at his neighbors' faces, seeing hope war with skepticism. "What about AgriCorp? They won't just walk away." "They can't touch us," Isabella said. "I gave them what they wanted, my resignation. In exchange, they agreed to abandon all claims on Cedar Valley. It's in writing, legally binding." "You gave up everything," Mia said softly. She'd arrived home from school and stood beside her father. "Your company, your money, all of it." Isabella met the teenager's eyes. "I traded it for something better, a chance to build something that matters." The news crews were setting up now, cameras rolling. A reporter pushed forward, "Miss Hart, sources say you've gone from billionaire to essentially broke in one day. Any regrets?" Isabella looked at the assembled farmers, at the field stretching out in the twilight, at Eli and Mia standing together. "My only regret is that it took falling off a cliff to see what really mattered." The story exploded across financial media. Billionaire gives away fortune to save small farms. Isabella Hart's radical anti-corporate stand. From CEO to zero, the Cedar Valley gamble. But in Cedar Valley itself, the real work was just beginning. Isabella moved into a small apartment above the old general store, taking a job as the trust's executive director at a salary that wouldn't have covered her previous monthly clothing budget. She appeared at Eli's farm the next morning in work boots and jeans, ready to help with the harvest preparation. "I need to learn," she said simply. "If I'm going to help run this trust, I need to understand farming from the ground up." "It's hard work," Eli warned. "I've fallen off cliffs and faced down corporate boards." "How hard can farming be?" 6 hours later, she had her answer. Isabella sat on the porch, nursing blisters on her hands despite the work gloves, sunburned despite the hat, and sorer than she'd ever been in her life. "Different muscles than yoga class," Mia teased, bringing her some lemonade. "Everything hurts," Isabella admitted. "How do you do this every day?" "You build up to it," Eli said, joining them on the porch. "Like anything worth doing, it takes time." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over fields that were finally, impossibly, green. The drought wasn't over. It might never truly be over, but they'd found a way to fight it. That night, there was a celebration at the community center. Nothing fancy. Potluck dishes, local musicians, kids running around while their parents shared cautious optimism about the future. Isabella hung back initially, still an outsider despite everything she'd done. Agnes Wheeler wouldn't have it. The old woman rolled her wheelchair over and grabbed Isabella's hand. "You're one of us now, whether you like it or not. Might as well start acting like it." She pulled Isabella onto the makeshift dance floor where Tom Morrison was calling square dances. Isabella protested that she didn't know how, but the community absorbed her, teaching her the steps, laughing at her mistakes, celebrating when she got it right. Eli watched from the side, nursing a beer and thinking about how much had changed in just a month. Mia appeared beside him. "You like her," his daughter said. It wasn't a question. "Mia, Mom would understand, Dad. It's been 3 years. It's complicated. Everything's complicated. That doesn't mean it's wrong." Later, as the party wound down, Eli found Isabella sitting outside looking at the stars again. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You already thanked me. About a dozen times. Not for the trust. For reminding me that accepting help isn't the same as giving up." Isabella turned to look at him. In the moonlight, he could see the faint scar on her forehead from the cliff fall. "You saved my life, Eli. And you saved my farm. I'd say we're even. What if I don't want to be even?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Before Eli could respond, Jack Carter came stumbling out of the community center, clearly drunk. "Well, if it isn't our savior," he slurred, focusing on Isabella. "The rich girl playing farmer." "Jack, go home," Eli said firmly. "No, I want to know." Jack swayed closer to Isabella. "What's your real game? Nobody gives away billions for nothing." Isabella stood, steady despite Jack's aggressive posture. "You're right. I didn't do it for nothing. I did it for my grandfather, who died believing he was a failure. I did it for every family who's lost their land to corporations like mine. And I did it because someone showed me that the right thing to do is rarely the easy thing." Jack stared at her for a long moment, then his shoulders sagged. "I lost everything last year. Wife left, took the kids, bank took half the farm. Other half isn't worth working. So join the trust," Isabella said gently. "Let us help you rebuild." "Why would you help me? I've been nothing but hostile." "Because that's what communities do. They help each other, even the difficult members." She smiled slightly. "Especially the difficult members." Jack broke down then, the tears of a proud man who'd held them in too long. Tom Morrison appeared, put an arm around his neighbor's shoulders, and led him away, promising to drive him home. "That was kind," Eli said. "It was necessary. The trust only works if everyone participates, even the Jack Carters of the world." They walked back toward the parking lot together. Isabella's apartment was just a few blocks away, but Eli found himself reluctant to let the evening end. "Would you like to see something?" he asked impulsively. She nodded, and he led her to his truck. They drove in comfortable silence through the dark roads, heading east toward the property line. He parked near a grove of old oak trees and grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment. "My great-grandfather planted these trees," he said, illuminating the massive trunks. "One for each of his children. 5 trees, 5 kids. That one there," he pointed to the largest, "was for my grandfather." Isabella ran her hand along the rough bark. "They're beautiful. During the worst of the drought, I'd come here to remind myself that some things endure. These trees have survived droughts, floods, tornadoes. They're still here. Like the Thompsons." "We're still here," he agreed. "Thanks to you, we'll stay here." Isabella leaned against one of the trees, looking up through the branches at the stars. "I've been thinking about permanence lately. In New York, everything was about the next quarter's profits, the next acquisition. Nothing was meant to last. And now? Now I'm learning to think in growing seasons, in generations." She paused. "It's terrifying and wonderful at the same time." Eli moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. "Isabella, Izzy," she said. "My grandfather called me Izzy. Izzy." The name felt right on his tongue. "This thing between us is complicated," she finished. "You're still grieving Sarah." "I'm adjusting to a completely different life. The whole valley is watching us." "All true." "But," she prompted, hearing the unspoken word, "but when I saw you hanging from that cliff, something in me woke up. Something I thought died with Sarah. And every day since, that feeling has grown stronger. Isabella reached out, took his calloused hand in her still soft one. I know. I feel it too. They stood there in the grove, holding hands like teenagers, neither ready to take the next step but unwilling to step back either. Finally, Eli drove her home, walking her to the door of her small apartment. Dinner tomorrow? He asked. Nothing fancy. Mia's making her famous spaghetti. I'd like that. As Eli drove home, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation for tomorrow. Not dread, not resignation, but genuine excitement about what might come next. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Isabella worked the trust during the day, learning the business of farming from the agricultural experts who'd joined their cause. In the evenings, she often found herself at the Thompson farm, helping with chores, sharing meals, becoming part of their routine. Mia took to her immediately, finding in Isabella not a mother replacement, but a friend and mentor who understood ambition, who could talk about college and careers and the world beyond Cedar Valley while still appreciating the value of home. The valley itself was transforming. The drought-resistant crops were exceeding all projections. The irrigation systems were so efficient that neighboring counties sent delegations to study them. The Trust's educational programs brought in young farmers, eager to learn sustainable techniques. But it wasn't without challenges. On a particularly hot day in late summer, Eli found Isabella in the Trust's office, surrounded by papers, looking overwhelmed. What's wrong? She gestured at the documents. 3 farms in the eastern section are failing despite our help. The Hendersons, the Pikes, and the Brennans. Their soil is too damaged from years of over-farming. It would take millions to rehabilitate it, money the Trust doesn't have. Eli studied the reports. What if we don't try to save them as individual farms? What do you mean? Combine them. Create a cooperative. 3 families working one large plot instead of 3 families failing on 3 small ones. The Trust could fund the consolidation. Isabella's eyes lit up. That could work. But would they agree to it? Farmers are independent by nature. They're also practical. Come on, let's go talk to them. They spent the day driving from farm to farm, presenting the idea. The Hendersons were skeptical, the Pikes interested, the Brennans desperate enough to try anything. It took a week of negotiations, but eventually, the Cedar Valley's first farming cooperative was born. The night they signed the papers, there was another celebration, smaller this time, just the 3 families and the trust board. Isabella watched the farmers toast their new partnership and felt a satisfaction no corporate merger had ever provided. You did good, Eli said, appearing beside her with a glass of wine. We did good, she corrected. It was your idea. My idea, your execution. We make a good team. The word team hung in the air, full of implication. They'd been dancing around their feelings for weeks now, the whole valley watching with barely concealed interest. Agnes Wheeler, never one for subtlety, finally confronted them at the valley's harvest festival. You 2 planning to do something about this obvious attraction, or are we all going to die of old age waiting? Isabella blushed. Eli stammered. Agnes cackled. Life's short, the old woman said. Trust me, I know. My Harold and I wasted 2 years being cautious. 2 years we could have been happy together. Don't make our mistake. That night, as the harvest moon rose full and bright, Eli found Isabella at their spot by the oak trees. She was sitting on a blanket, a picnic basket beside her. Thought you might come here, she said. He sat beside her, close enough that their knees touched. Izzy, I need to tell you something about Sarah. You don't have to. I do. He took a breath. The night before she died, she made me promise something. She said I had to keep living, really living, not just existing for Mia's sake. She said I had to find happiness again. Eli, I fought that promise. Felt like betraying her to even think about someone else. But then you fell into my life, literally, and everything changed. Isabella took his hand. I didn't come to Cedar Valley looking for this. I came to hide from my life, to figure out my next corporate move. Instead, I found a home. I found a purpose. I found you. Under the harvest moon, surrounded by the oak trees that had weathered every storm, Eli kissed Isabella for the first time. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. She answered by pulling him closer, her hands tangling in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "The whole valley's going to talk," Eli said. "Let them talk," Isabella replied. "I've faced corporate boards and hostile takeovers. I can handle small-town gossip, but the gossip, when it came, was surprisingly supportive. The valley had watched Isabella transform from outsider to neighbor, from billionaire to partner. They'd seen her work until her hands bled, seen her fight for their farms, seen her give up everything to save their way of life. At the general store, where the old-timers gathered for coffee and gossip, the consensus was clear. "About time," they said. "That girl's good for Eli. Good for Mia. Good for all of us." The autumn days grew shorter, and with them came a letter that would shake the foundation of everything they'd built. Isabella found it slipped under the trust office door on a Monday morning, the AgriCorp logo emblazoned on expensive stationery. Her hands trembled as she read it aloud to Eli, who'd stopped by with coffee from the diner. "Dear Ms. Hart, the board of directors has completed its review of your recent activities. While your resignation resolved certain immediate concerns, new information has come to light. We have discovered documentation suggesting that your accident at Devil's Drop was staged, part of an elaborate scheme to defraud AgriCorp and manipulate local farmers. Unless you can prove otherwise, we will be pursuing criminal charges and seeking to dissolve the Cedar Valley Agricultural Preservation Trust as a fraudulent enterprise. You have 10 days to respond. Sincerely, Richard Blackstone, Acting CEO." The coffee cup slipped from Eli's hand, shattering on the floor. "They're saying you planned it." "That's insane!" Isabella sank into her chair, the weight of the accusation crushing. "They must have found something, twisted some evidence. Eli, if they pursue this, everyone who benefited from the trust could be implicated. The whole valley." "Stop." Eli knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. "We're not letting them do this." "What do they actually have?" She pulled out her phone, scrolling through emails. "My assistant in New York just sent this. Apparently someone found records showing I'd researched Cedar Valley extensively before my accident. Property records, drought statistics, even your family's history." "So?" "That doesn't prove anything. It establishes premeditation. Combined with the fact that I was an experienced rider who shouldn't have been thrown so easily." She trailed off, seeing the doubt flicker across his face. "Eli, you can't think." "I don't think anything except that Blackstone is desperate. You cost him his promotion to permanent CEO when the board saw how badly he handled the Cedar Valley situation. This is revenge." Mia burst through the door, having run from school during her lunch break. "It's all over the internet. They're calling you the billionaire scammer. Dad, they're saying horrible things." "None of it's true," Eli said firmly, though Isabella heard the tiny seed of uncertainty in his voice. It broke her heart. "I need to go to New York," Isabella said. "Face this head on." "We're coming with you," Eli said. "No, this is my fight." "Our fight," he corrected. "You didn't stage that accident, which means someone's lying. And I'm going to help you prove it." Old Agnes Wheeler appeared in the doorway, pushed by Tom Morrison. Behind them, half the valley seemed to have gathered. "Heard there's trouble," Agnes said simply. "What do you need?" Isabella looked at the assembled farmers, these people who had every reason to doubt her, to protect themselves. "I need the truth to matter more than money for once." "Well then," Agnes said, "you've come to the right place. We might not have much, but we've got plenty of truth." The next days were a whirlwind of activity. While Isabella worked with lawyers, Eli did what he did best. He investigated the land itself. He returned to Devil's Drop with Tom and Jack Carter, now sober and determined to help. "Look at this," Jack said, pointing to marks on the rock face. "These gouges in the stone. They're fresh, but not from that day. Someone's been here since, trying to make it look like the ground gave way differently than it did." Tom was examining the area where Isabella's horse had supposedly spooked. "Snake Den here's been destroyed. Recently. Someone trying to eliminate evidence of what scared the horse?" Eli photographed everything, his mind working through possibilities. Someone was definitely trying to rewrite history, but who? And why now? Back at the trust office, Mia had become an unexpected investigator. "Mom always said follow the money," she told Isabella. "So I did." Look at this. She'd pulled up financial records, publicly available but obscure. 3 days before your accident, someone bought a massive number of put options against Agricorp stock, basically betting the company would lose value. When you gave away your fortune and resigned, they made millions. Who? Isabella asked. Shell company registered in Delaware, but I tracked the lawyer who filed the paperwork. Mia pulled up another screen. Same lawyer who represents Richard Blackstone's personal interests. Isabella stared at the screen. He bet against his own company. He bet against you, Eli said, understanding dawning. He knew you'd react emotionally to something involving farms. He just needed to create the right situation. But he couldn't have planned my accident. No, Eli agreed. But he could have planned to be ready when an opportunity presented itself. Your accident was real, Izzy. His exploitation of it is the fraud. They worked through the night building their case. Agnes, despite her age, proved to have a sharp legal mind. My Harold was a lawyer before he became a farmer, she explained. Picked up a few things over the years. By dawn, they had a theory, but they needed proof, and they needed it from New York. Isabella made the call she'd been dreading. James? It's me. Her former driver and security chief answered immediately. Miss Hart, I've been hoping you'd call. Things here are not good. I need your help, James. The real story about what happened the day of my accident. There was a long pause. I kept the GPS records from the car. You asked me to take you to Cedar Valley specifically to scout properties for acquisition. It was business, pure business. But then you saw something that changed your mind. What did I see? A foreclosure auction, the Brennan farm. The eldest son was crying as they sold his family's equipment. You made me stop the car, and you watched for 20 minutes without saying a word. Then you told me to take you to the resort, that you needed to think. Isabella closed her eyes, the memory flooding back. I went riding to clear my head. And came back injured and changed. Miss Hart, I have the dashcam footage from that day. It shows everything, including Mr. Blackstone's car following us to Cedar Valley. The pieces clicked into place. Blackstone had been following her, waiting for an opportunity. When she'd had her accident, her very real, very unplanned accident, he'd seen his chance. Can you send the footage? Already uploading it. Miss Hart, there's more. Blackstone's been systematically destroying evidence, bribing resort staff to change their stories. But he didn't count on one thing, the veterinarian who treated your horse. Dr. Susan Marsh was a small-town vet who'd happened to be at the resort checking on their stable horses when Isabella's mount had returned without her. She'd examined the animal and found clear evidence of a snake bite. Photos, treatment records, everything needed to prove the accident was genuine. I'll testify, she told Isabella over the phone. That horse was in genuine distress. No way that was staged. Armed with evidence, Isabella prepared to return to New York. But first, there was something she needed to do. She found Eli in his field, working on the irrigation system. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. He straightened, seeing the seriousness in her face. Always. Did you ever doubt me? Even for a moment? Eli set down his tools and took her hands. For about 30 seconds, I wondered. Then I remembered the look in your eyes when I pulled you up. Pure terror, pure relief. Nobody's that good an actor. But you wondered. I'm human, Izzy. But doubt and disbelief are different things. I doubted for a moment. I never disbelieved. She kissed him then, pouring all her fear and gratitude into it. I have to go fight this. I know. We'll be here when you get back. Actually, Mia said, appearing with a backpack. We won't. Dad, I already packed your bag. We're going with her. Mia. Family supports family, the teenager said firmly. Isabella's family now. Besides, I want to see New York. The three of them drove to the airport in Eli's truck, Isabella having long since sold her luxury vehicles. The flight was Isabella's first time in coach, squeezed between Eli and a businessman who spent the entire flight talking loudly on his phone. This is horrible, she whispered to Eli. This is normal, he replied with a grin. New York hit Eli and Mia like a physical force. The noise, the crowds, the sheer vertical scale of everything. Isabella watched them take it in, seeing her former city through their eyes. People actually live here? Mia asked, craning her neck to see the tops of buildings. Millions of them, Isabella confirmed. I used to love it. The energy, the power, the sense that everything important happened here. And now, Eli asked, now I know that important things happen everywhere. They just happen more quietly in some places. They stayed at a modest hotel that Isabella paid for with her trust director's salary, a far cry from her former penthouse. That evening, James arrived with a box of evidence and a warning. Blackstone knows you're here. He's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He plans to present his evidence and have you arrested for fraud. Then we'll have to present ours first, Isabella said. She spent the night preparing, Eli and Mia helping her organize documents, practice her presentation. At 3 a.m., Mia fell asleep on the hotel room couch. Eli covered her with a blanket, then sat beside Isabella at the small desk. You should sleep, he said. Can't. Too nervous. You faced them before. I had billions of dollars of armor then. Now I just have the truth. The truth and a valley full of people who believe in you. That's better armor. She leaned against his shoulder. How did I get so lucky? You fell off a cliff, he said dryly. Not everyone's so fortunate. Despite everything, she laughed. The next morning, Isabella walked into the AgriCorp boardroom wearing a simple business suit she'd bought off the rack, flanked by Eli in his only tie and Mia in her school debate team outfit. The board members, 12 of the most powerful people in agriculture, looked at them with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. Blackstone stood at the presentation screen, his evidence already displayed. Ms. Hart, how good of you to join us. I was just explaining how you defrauded this company of millions. I resigned, Isabella said calmly. I used my personal funds to create the trust. Where's the fraud? The fraud, Blackstone said triumphantly, is that you staged your accident to manipulate the locals into trusting you, thereby facilitating your theft of corporate resources for your pet project. Interesting theory. Isabella connected her laptop to the system. Let me present an alternative one. She began with the dashcam footage showing Blackstone following her to Cedar Valley, then the veterinary records proving her horse had been genuinely injured, the destroyed snake den, the altered cliff face, all evidence of someone trying to rewrite history after the fact. But the most damning evidence, she said, pulling up the financial records Mia had found, is this. Mr. Blackstone, you bet against AgriCorp stock 3 days before my accident. Either you're psychic or you were planning to use any opportunity to destroy me and profit from it. The boardroom erupted. Members demanded explanations from Blackstone, who was stuttering denials. In the chaos, Isabella noticed one board member, elderly Marcus Chen, watching silently. Ms. Hart, he said, his quiet voice somehow cutting through the noise, you gave away your fortune to save farms we were planning to acquire. Why? Isabella looked at Eli and Mia, drawing strength from their presence. Because I remembered why I started this company. My grandfather lost his farm to a corporation that saw land as commodity, not community. I built AgriCorp to be different, but somewhere along the way we became exactly what we'd fought against. And now? Chen asked. Now I'm trying to make amends. The Cedar Valley Trust isn't just about saving farms. It's about proving that there's another way to do business, one that values longevity over profit, community over commodity. Chen nodded slowly. Mr. Blackstone, you're terminated, effective immediately. The board will be referring this matter to the SEC for investigation of insider trading. He turned to Isabella. Ms. Hart, we cannot undo your resignation, nor would we want to. You've chosen a different path, but AgriCorp will not pursue any action against the Cedar Valley Trust. In fact, we'd like to propose a partnership. A partnership? Isabella asked suspiciously. Your trust has developed remarkable drought-resistant technologies. We'd like to license them, with the profits going back to the trust. It would fund your operations for decades. Isabella looked at Eli, who nodded slightly. I'd need to discuss it with my board. Your board? Chen asked. The farmers of Cedar Valley. They're the ones who truly own the trust. As they left the building, Blackstone was being escorted out by security, his career in ruins. He shot them a venomous look, but said nothing. On the street, Mia was bouncing with excitement. We won! Isabella, you destroyed him. We won, Isabella corrected, and it's not about destroying anyone. It's about building something better. They celebrated at a small pizza place that Eli chose, much to Isabella's amusement. You're in New York and you want pizza from a chain restaurant? I want to eat somewhere that exists in both our worlds, he said simply. As they ate, Isabella's phone rang constantly. Reporters, lawyers, even some of her old society friends suddenly interested in reconnecting. She ignored them all. No regrets? Eli asked. None, she said, then paused. Well, one. What? I can't afford to fly us home first class. Mia laughed. Welcome to regular people problems. The flight home was delayed, bumpy, and completely perfect. Isabella dozed on Eli's shoulder while Mia watched movies on her phone. Just another family returning from a trip. Cedar Valley welcomed them back as heroes. The story had spread, how Isabella had faced down the board, how Blackstone had been exposed, how the trust was not only safe, but potentially funded for generations. At an emergency meeting that night, the farmers voted unanimously to accept AgriCorp's licensing deal with one condition that Jack Carter proposed. The money stays here. Every penny goes to saving farms, educating young farmers, and protecting our way of life. Isabella stood to address the crowd. I need to tell you all something. When I first came here, I was running from my life. I thought I was taking a break from reality. But you taught me that this is reality. The land, the community, the connections between people who choose to support each other despite their differences. Pretty words, Agnes Wheeler called out. But what are you really saying? I'm saying I'm staying. Permanently. If you'll have me. The cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next county. Later, as the celebration continued, Eli found Isabella standing outside, looking at the stars. It had become their tradition, these quiet moments under the vast sky. 6 months ago, my biggest worry was a hostile takeover, she said. Now it's whether we'll get rain next week. The rain'll come, Eli said with the confidence of a fourth-generation farmer. It always does, eventually. And if it doesn't? Then we'll survive that too. We've got the irrigation systems, the drought-resistant crops, and most importantly, we've got each other. Isabella turned to face him. Eli Thompson, are you always this optimistic? Only since a certain billionaire fell into my life. Ex-billionaire, she corrected. The money never mattered to me, Izzy. You know that. I know. That's why I love you. The words hung in the air between them, spoken aloud for the first time. Eli pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. I love you too. Sarah would have loved you. She would have said you were exactly what this stubborn farmer needed. A reformed corporate raider with no money and too much ambition? A fighter. Someone who sees what could be, not just what is. They were interrupted by Mia clearing her throat. Not to break up this beautiful moment, but there's something you both need to see. She led them back inside where Tom Morrison had his laptop open. On the screen was a news article. The Cedar Valley Miracle, How One Community's Stand Against Corporate Agriculture is Inspiring a National Movement. The article detailed how farmers across the country were forming trusts similar to Cedar Valley's, using Isabella's template. Agricultural colleges were sending students to study their methods. The Department of Agriculture was considering implementing their water conservation techniques as national guidelines. You did this, Tom said to Isabella. You started something that could save American farming. We did this, Isabella corrected, looking around the room at the faces that had become family. Every one of us. As autumn turned to winter, the trust's work continued. More farms joined, including some from neighboring counties. The cooperative model proved so successful that it expanded, with multiple family farms working together, sharing equipment and expertise. Isabella threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd once applied to corporate acquisitions, but with a different purpose. She was building something meant to last, not to be sold. One snowy evening in December, Eli found her in the trust office, surrounded by seed catalogs and agricultural journals. Come home, he said. Mia's making hot chocolate. 5 more minutes. I just need to finish this grant application. He walked over and closed her laptop. The work will be here tomorrow. But, Izzy, you can't save every farm tonight. Come home. Home. The word still sometimes surprised her. Home was now a farmhouse that creaked in the wind, where 3 generations of Thompsons had been born, where Sarah's memory lived alongside their growing love. As they walked through the snow, Eli suddenly stopped. "Marry me." Isabella nearly slipped on the ice. "What?" "I'm not good at grand gestures. I don't have a ring because I can't afford the kind you deserve, but I know that I want to wake up next to you for whatever time we have. I want to face whatever comes, drought, floods, corporate lawyers, together." Isabella looked at this man who'd saved her in more ways than one, who'd shown her a life worth living beyond stock prices and board meetings. Yes. Yes? Did you expect a different answer? I expected you to want something fancier than a proposal in the snow outside the feed store. She kissed him, snow falling around them. Eli Thompson, haven't you learned by now? I gave up fancy. I chose real. Mia was waiting on the porch when they got home, somehow knowing something had changed. Finally, she exclaimed when she saw their faces. I was starting to think I'd have to propose for you, Dad. The wedding was planned for spring, when the fields would be green and the apple trees in bloom. The entire valley threw itself into preparations with the enthusiasm usually reserved for harvest season. Agnes Wheeler appointed herself wedding coordinator, brooking no argument. I've seen 8 decades of weddings in this valley. I know what works. But before they could celebrate new beginnings, winter brought its own challenges. A brutal ice storm knocked out power to half the valley, including the heated greenhouses protecting the experimental crops. Isabella and Eli worked through the night alongside their neighbors, running generators, covering plants, doing everything possible to save what they'd built. By dawn, exhausted and filthy, they'd managed to save most of the crop. "This is what you gave up billions for," Eli said as they collapsed in his kitchen, too tired to even remove their frozen boots. "Still worth it." Isabella looked at him, unshaven, muddy, with hay in his hair, and thought about her former life of personal trainers and private jets. Every penny. The weather eventually broke, and with spring came renewal. The seeds they'd planted sprouted. The trust's bank account grew with the AgriCorp licensing fees, and 3 more valleys formed similar trusts based on their model. But the most important growth was personal. Isabella, who'd once measured her worth in stock portfolios, now measured it in acres saved, families helped, communities preserved. She'd gained something money couldn't buy: the respect of people who valued character over wealth. One evening, as wedding preparations reached fever pitch, Isabella found a package on the trust office doorstep. Inside was a letter and a small box. The letter was from Marcus Chen. "Miss Hart, your grandfather would be proud. You've done what he never could, found a way to fight back. Consider this a wedding gift from someone who remembers what American agriculture used to be and believes in what it could become again." The box contained her grandmother's wedding ring, the one piece of jewelry she'd kept from her grandfather's farm sale, later lost when AgriCorp had cleared out her office. Chen had somehow retrieved it. She was still crying when Eli found her. "What's wrong?" She showed him the ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond, worth perhaps $1,000. "It's perfect," she said. "It's not exactly the Harry Winston piece you probably imagined. Eli Thompson, if you dare suggest this ring isn't exactly what I want, I'll push you off Devil's Drop myself." He laughed, pulling her close. "Wouldn't recommend it. Some crazy woman might try to rescue me." The week before the wedding, one more surprise arrived. A convoy of expensive cars wound through Cedar Valley, stopping at the Thompson farm. Out stepped Isabella's former colleagues from New York, lawyers, bankers, even some board members from various companies she'd worked with. "What are you doing here?" Isabella asked, stunned. Jennifer Cross, the lawyer who'd once threatened to destroy the trust, stepped forward. "We came to see what you built, to understand why you walked away from everything." They toured the valley, these masters of finance walking through muddy fields, touching experimental crops, talking to farmers who explained soil pH and water retention with the passion they usually reserved for merger deals. That evening, at the community center, something remarkable happened. The visitors, moved by what they'd seen, began writing checks. Not investments seeking returns, but donations. Consider it venture capital for the future, one said. By the end of the evening, they'd raised another $2 million for the trust. But more importantly, several committed to starting similar programs in their own regions. Jennifer Cross pulled Isabella aside. I was wrong about you. You didn't lose your mind when you gave up your fortune. You found your soul. The morning of the wedding dawned with an ominous red sky that had the old-timers shaking their heads. Storm coming? Agnes Wheeler muttered as she supervised the decoration of the community center. Big one by the look of it. Isabella stood in the farmhouse bedroom that had once been Sarah's, wearing a simple white dress she'd bought at the mall 2 towns over. Mia was helping with her hair, having insisted on being maid of honor. Through the window, she could see the apple trees in full bloom, their petals starting to dance in the rising wind. You nervous? Mia asked, pinning another bobby pin into place. Terrified, Isabella admitted. Not about marrying your dad. About everything else. The weather, the trust, whether I'm really cut out for this life. Mia turned her around, hands on her shoulders. Mom told me something before she died. She said the right choice is usually the scary one. If you're terrified, you're probably exactly where you need to be. A knock at the door interrupted them. Tom Morrison entered, his face grave. Isabella, we've got a problem. There's a man downstairs says he's your father. Isabella's blood ran cold. She hadn't spoken to William Hart in 5 years, not since he'd disowned her for refusing to marry the senator's son he'd picked out. What does he want? To walk you down the aisle, he says. But Eli's about ready to throw him out. Isabella rushed downstairs to find her father standing in the living room, impeccable in his tailored suit, looking utterly out of place among the simple wedding preparations. Eli stood opposite him, jaw clenched, while half the wedding party watched from the doorway. Hello, Isabella, William Hart said, his voice carrying the same cold authority she remembered. I heard about your situation. My wedding, you mean? Your descent into madness, giving away billions to play farmer, marrying someone who probably doesn't even have a college degree? Get out, Eli said quietly, dangerously. William ignored him, focusing on his daughter. I'm here to offer you a way back. The Hart family fortune is substantial. You could leave all this behind, return to New York, reclaim your position in society. In exchange for what? Isabella asked, though she already knew. Leaving this foolishness behind, annulling this trust nonsense, marrying someone appropriate. The room was dead silent. Everyone waited for Isabella's response. She walked to her father, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, see the disappointment etched in every line of his face. You know what I remember most about Grandpa? She said softly. The day the bank took his farm, you wouldn't even go with him to clear out the house. You were ashamed of him, of where you came from. You spent your whole life running from those fields, and you expected me to run too. I expected you to have sense. I have something better than sense. I have purpose. She stepped back, taking Eli's hand. This is my family now. These people who show up for each other, who build instead of acquire, who measure wealth in relationships, not portfolios. You can stay for the wedding or leave. But if you stay, you sit quietly and respect the choice I've made. William Hart looked around the room at the farmers in their best clothes, at his daughter in her simple dress, at the man holding her hand protectively. You're making a mistake you'll regret. The only thing I regret is that it took me so long to find my way here. He left without another word, his departure lifting a weight from the room. Agnes Wheeler was the first to speak. Well, that was better than cable TV. Now, we've got a wedding to finish preparing, and that storm's not waiting for anyone. The ceremony was moved inside as the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the community center. But nobody seemed to mind the cramped quarters. If anything, it made the gathering feel more intimate, more real. Eli stood at the makeshift altar, Jack Carter serving as his best man in an unexpected gesture of friendship. When the music started, Tom Morrison on his guitar playing a simple melody. Isabella walked down the aisle alone, choosing to give herself away. Reverend Mitchell, who'd married most of the valley over his 40 years of service, kept the ceremony short as thunder began to rumble overhead. These two have already made their vows through actions, he said. They've chosen each other not in ease but in hardship, not in wealth but in purpose. The words we say today are just confirmation of what their hearts already know. When Eli kissed his bride, lightning flashed outside, as if nature itself was celebrating. Then the lights went out. In the darkness, someone laughed. Agnes Wheeler, of course. 40 years ago, same thing happened at my wedding. We called it good luck. Candles were lit, lanterns brought out. The storm raged outside, but inside the celebration continued. Someone had brought a battery-powered speaker, and couples danced by candlelight. The formal reception transformed into something more primal, more honest. Isabella and Eli swayed together in the center of the room, her wedding dress now splattered with mud from helping secure the outdoor decorations before they blew away. "This isn't exactly the wedding you probably dreamed about as a little girl," he said. "No," she agreed. "It's better. It's real." The storm intensified and word came that the bridge over Cedar Creek was flooding. Half the guests wouldn't be able to get home, so they didn't try. The wedding reception became a slumber party, guests sleeping on community center floors, sharing stories through the night. Around 3 in the morning, Isabella found herself sitting with Agnes Wheeler, both unable to sleep. The old woman was looking at a faded photograph in her wallet. "My Harold," she explained, "died 15 years ago next month. You must miss him. Every day." "But you know what I learned? Love doesn't end with death. It transforms. I see Harold in every good harvest, every neighbor helping neighbor, every young couple brave enough to take a chance." She patted Isabella's hand. "You and Eli, you remind me of us. Different backgrounds, same hearts." "Were people opposed to your marriage too?" Agnes laughed. "My father threatened to disown me. Harold was a city lawyer. I was a farm girl. Nobody thought it would work. But it did. 62 years. He learned to farm, I learned to read legal briefs. We built something neither of us could have managed alone." She looked at Isabella shrewdly. "That's what you're doing with the trust. Building something bigger than any one person could manage." The storm finally broke near dawn. The wedding guests emerged to find devastation, trees down, the creek overflowing its banks, several barns damaged. Without discussion or organization, everyone simply started working. Wedding guests in formal clothes mucked out flooded basements, cleared fallen trees, repaired what could be fixed. Isabella and Eli, still in their wedding clothes, worked alongside everyone else. When a news crew arrived to cover the storm damage, they found the unexpected story of a community coming together, led by a bride and groom who turned their wedding into a relief effort. "Why aren't you on your honeymoon?" the reporter asked Isabella. "This is our honeymoon," she replied, gesturing to the neighbors working together. "This is what love looks like in Cedar Valley." The story went viral. Within days, donations poured in for storm relief. But more importantly, the image of Isabella in her muddy wedding dress, helping clear storm debris, became a symbol of something larger, a rejection of superficial perfection in favor of authentic community. 3 weeks after the wedding, when the storm damage had been mostly repaired, another challenge emerged. A developer named Marcus Stone arrived in Cedar Valley with a proposal that divided the community. He wanted to build a sustainable living community on the eastern edge of the valley, bringing in wealthy retirees who would support local farmers by buying directly from them. "It's a Trojan horse," Jack Carter argued at the town meeting. "First it's retirees, then it's golf courses and shopping centers." "Or it's salvation," countered Beth Henderson, whose farm was still struggling despite the trust's help. "Those retirees would provide a steady market for our produce." Isabella found herself caught in the middle. As trust director, her opinion carried weight, but the community was split. Eli, typically practical, saw both sides. "We need the income," he told Isabella that night as they lay in bed in the farmhouse that was now officially their home. "But Jack's not wrong about the risks." "What would Sarah have said?" Isabella asked. It had become her way of honoring Eli's late wife, acknowledging that Sarah's wisdom still guided them. Eli was quiet for a moment. "She would have said that fear of change is just another kind of drought. It kills things slowly but surely." The next day, Isabella met with Marcus Stone privately. He was younger than she'd expected, early 40s, with calluses that suggested he wasn't just another paper pusher. I grew up on a farm in Iowa, he told her. Watched it get bought out, turned into suburban sprawl. I've spent 10 years figuring out how to develop land without destroying its character. And you think you've figured it out? I think I've found a balance. Look at these plans. He spread blueprints across her desk. Maximum of 50 homes, all on lots no smaller than 5 acres. Strict architectural guidelines to maintain rural character. Every homeowner required to purchase a farm share from local producers. It's community-supported agriculture on steroids. Isabella studied the plans. They were thoughtful, respectful even, but she'd learned that good intentions on paper didn't always translate to reality. I need guarantees, she said, legal, binding guarantees that this won't expand beyond what you're showing me. Then let's write them together. Make the trust a partner, give you veto power over any changes. It took 6 weeks of negotiations, town halls that sometimes erupted into shouting matches, and countless revisions. But eventually, they reached an agreement that most could live with. The development would happen, but with unprecedented restrictions and community oversight. The day they broke ground, protesters stood at the entrance. Not many, but enough to make their point. Jack Carter held a sign reading, "Not for sale." Isabella walked over to him. "Jack, I respect your position, but I need you to respect that this decision was made democratically." "Democracy doesn't make it right," he said bitterly. "No, but it makes it legitimate. And if we're wrong, the restrictions we've put in place mean the damage will be limited." Jack looked at her for a long moment. "I hope you're right, Isabella." "I really do." Construction began in the fall, and with it came unexpected benefits. Local contractors had worked through the winter. The planned community center would be shared with Cedar Valley, providing a new venue for gatherings. And the first buyers were exactly what Marcus had promised: retired teachers, doctors, small business owners looking for a simpler life, not wealthy elites seeking a country playground. One of the first couples to buy were the Johnsons, retired professors from Chicago. They immediately signed up for CSA shares from 3 different farms and volunteered to tutor local kids struggling with college prep. "See," Eli told Isabella as they watched the Johnsons help with the Thompson farm's harvest. "Sometimes change is just change, not catastrophe." But their personal challenges were just beginning. In November, Isabella discovered she was pregnant. She stared at the test strip in the bathroom of the farmhouse, her hands shaking. She and Eli had discussed children, but in vague, future terms. The reality was overwhelming. She found Eli in the barn repairing a stall door. "We need to talk." The look on her face made him set down his hammer immediately. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's just changing, again." She handed him the pregnancy test. Eli stared at it for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." "I'm 37, Eli. That's considered advanced maternal age. There are risks. There are always risks. The drought could come back, the trust could fail, the world could end tomorrow. But we keep planting seeds anyway." Mia's reaction was pure joy. "I'm going to be a big sister." Finally. "Do you know how long I've wanted siblings?" The pregnancy news spread through Cedar Valley at the speed only small-town gossip can achieve. Within days, Isabella was being plied with advice. Hand-me-down baby clothes and enough casseroles to feed an army. Agnes Wheeler appointed herself unofficial grandmother. "This baby will belong to all of us," she declared. "First child born to the trust director?" That makes it Cedar Valley royalty. But the pregnancy was difficult. Morning sickness lasted all day, and Isabella struggled to keep up with the trust's demanding schedule. She was reviewing grant applications when the cramping started, sharp and sudden. Eli rushed her to the hospital 2 towns over, both terrified they were losing the baby. The doctor, a young woman named Sarah, the name felt like a sign, was reassuring. "The baby's fine. But you need to slow down, Mrs. Thompson. Your body is telling you to rest." "I can't rest. The trust needs you healthy," Eli interrupted. "We'll figure it out." They did figure it out, with the community stepping up in ways that would have seemed impossible in Isabella's corporate life. Tom Morrison took over the daily operations. Beth Henderson handled the books. Even Jack Carter grudgingly helped with grant writing. "This is what you built," Eli told her as she watched from the porch. under strict orders to rest. A community that functions without any one person being irreplaceable. Including me. Especially you. You taught us to fish, Izzy. Now let us do the fishing while you grow our baby. Winter was mild that year, a blessing after the previous year's storms. The experimental crops exceeded all projections. The trust model was being replicated in 12 states. Agricultural universities were sending students to study their methods. But success brought new challenges. A documentary filmmaker named Rebecca Chen, Marcus Chen's daughter as it turned out, arrived wanting to tell their story. "I want to show America that there's another way," she said, her passion evident. "Your story could inspire thousands of communities." Isabella was hesitant. "We're not looking for fame." "You're not looking for it, but it found you anyway. The question is whether you'll use it purposefully or let others define your narrative." Rebecca was persuasive, and after much discussion, the community agreed. She embedded herself in Cedar Valley for 3 months, cameras capturing everything from dawn harvest to late-night trust meetings. She was there when disaster struck again. A late freeze in March threatened to destroy the entire apple crop, which many farms depended on for crucial spring income. The community rallied, using every technique from smudge pots to giant fans to protect the blooms. Isabella, now 7 months pregnant, could only watch and coordinate from the house. The helplessness was agony. "I should be out there," she told Eli. "You are out there," he replied, pointing to the organized chaos outside. "Every person fighting for those trees is doing it because of what you helped build." They saved most of the crop, though the effort exhausted everyone. Rebecca's cameras captured it all. The desperation, the cooperation, the celebration when the sun finally rose on protected blooms. "This is the real story," Rebecca told Isabella. "Not the billionaire who gave it all away, but the community that made that sacrifice worthwhile." The baby came early, during a spring thunderstorm that reminded everyone of the wedding. Isabella's labor was long and difficult, with complications that required an emergency C-section. For terrifying hours, both mother and baby's lives hung in the balance. Eli paced the hospital waiting room, Mia holding his hand while half of Cedar Valley filled the halls. Agnes Wheeler led a prayer circle. Jack Carter, gruff Jack who'd opposed everything, brought coffee for everyone and refused to leave. When Dr. Sarah finally emerged with a smile, the entire hospital erupted in celebration. "It's a boy," she announced. "Both mother and baby are stable." They named him William Harrison Thompson. William for Isabella's grandfather, not her father, Harrison for Eli's family line, and Thompson to root him firmly in the land that had brought his parents together. Isabella held her son for the first time as dawn broke over Cedar Valley, visible through the hospital window. He was tiny but fierce, gripping her finger with surprising strength. "He's got your determination," Eli said, touching his son's dark hair. "And your stubbornness," she replied. "That'll serve him well. He's going to grow up in a world we're still building." Mia leaned over her new brother, tears streaming down her face. "Mom would have loved him," she whispered. "She would have," Eli agreed, "and she would have loved what we've become." The documentary premiered that fall at the Cedar Valley Harvest Festival. Rebecca had crafted something beautiful, not a fairy tale, but an honest portrayal of struggle, sacrifice, and community. There wasn't a dry eye when the credits rolled. Afterwards, as the festival continued around them, Isabella stood with baby Will in her arms, watching her neighbors dance, laugh, and celebrate another successful harvest. The drought-resistant crops had yielded beyond expectations. The trust had enough funds to operate for the next 5 years. The sustainable living community had integrated successfully, with retirees and farmers forming unexpected friendships. "Any regrets?" Eli asked, wrapping his arms around her and their son. Isabella thought about her former life. The penthouse, the private jets, the power lunches where million-dollar deals were made between courses. Then she looked at her baby's face, at her husband's calloused hands, at Mia teaching the Johnson grandchildren to square dance, at Agnes Wheeler holding court from her wheelchair, at even Jack Carter, laughing at something Tom Morrison had said. "Only one," she said. Eli raised an eyebrow. "I wish I'd fallen off that cliff sooner." They laughed together as lightning bugs began their evening dance over fields that had nearly died but were now thriving. The band struck up another song, and someone called for the Thompsons to join the dancing. "Can't dance with a baby," Isabella protested. "Sure you can," Agnes Wheeler called out. "Been doing it for 80 years. So they danced, the three of them, four if you counted Will, in the community center where they'd been married, surrounded by people who'd become family, on land that had been saved by sacrifice and sustained by love. Later that night, as they drove home, Will sleeping in his car seat, Mia dozing against the window, Isabella saw a familiar figure by the side of the road. Richard Blackstone, of all people, stood beside a broken-down luxury car, cell phone clearly not getting signal. "We should stop," she told Eli. "Are you kidding? After everything he did? Especially after everything he did." Eli sighed but pulled over. Blackstone's face cycled through surprise, shame, and desperation when he recognized them. "I'll call for help," Eli said curtly. "Phone doesn't work out here," Blackstone replied. "I was heading to Cedar Valley." "To see you, actually," he added, looking at Isabella. "Why?" she asked. "To apologize. And to ask for help. I lost everything after the insider trading investigation. My wife left, took the kids. I'm broke, disgraced. I remembered what you said about second chances and thought, hoped." Isabella studied him. The arrogant executive was gone, replaced by a broken man who'd lost his way. She thought about mercy, about communities that took in even their difficult members, about the transformation she'd witnessed. "There's a farm on the eastern edge that needs a manager," she said slowly. "The owner's getting too old to run it alone. It doesn't pay much, and you'd have to learn everything from scratch." "I'll take it," Blackstone said immediately. "I'll take anything. It's not my decision alone. The community would have to approve it. Then I'll earn their approval." As they drove him to town, Isabella caught Eli's eye in the rearview mirror. He shook his head slightly but smiled. This was who she was, someone who believed in redemption, in second chances, in the possibility of change. "You're going to try to save him, aren't you?" Eli said later, after they'd left Blackstone at the small motel. "The valley saved me," Isabella replied. "Maybe it can save him too. He's not a stray dog, is he? He tried to destroy everything we built. And now he's got nothing. Isn't that when we're supposed to show mercy?" Eli pulled her close. "Your compassion is going to be the death of me. Or the making of you." The next morning brought news that would change everything again. The state legislature had passed a bill based on Cedar Valley's model, providing funding for agricultural trusts statewide. Isabella was invited to testify before Congress about taking the program national. She stood in the kitchen, baby Will on her hip, reading the official invitation. "They want me to go to Washington." "Then go," Mia said, not looking up from her college applications. She'd been accepted early admission to State University's veterinary program, the scholarship from the trust making it possible. "It's not that simple. The baby, the trust, the farm, will all be here when you get back," Eli said. "Izzy, this is a chance to save thousands of farms, not just ours." She went, taking Will with her because she was still nursing. Her testimony, delivered in a simple black suit while occasionally adjusting the baby carrier, was unlike anything Congress had seen. "Senators," she began, "I was once worth $2.8 billion. Now I'm worth something far more valuable. I'm part of a community that measures wealth not in dollars, but in sustainability, not in quarters, but in generations." She spoke for 20 minutes about drought and determination, about pride and practicality, about the false choice between preservation and progress. When Will fussed, she nursed him right there in the chamber, continuing her testimony while several senators looked scandalized and others tried not to smile. The image, a former billionaire nursing her baby while testifying to Congress about saving American agriculture, became iconic. The bill passed 3 months later. The weeks following the congressional testimony brought a whirlwind of attention that neither Isabella nor Cedar Valley was prepared for. News crews became a constant presence, and the small motel 2 towns over couldn't accommodate all the agricultural delegates, foreign observers, and government officials who suddenly needed to see the Cedar Valley miracle for themselves. Richard Blackstone, still awaiting the community's decision on his fate, had been quietly working at the motel, cleaning rooms and fixing whatever needed repair. Isabella found him there one morning, patching a roof leak while wearing an ill-fitting maintenance uniform. "The mighty have fallen," he said without bitterness when he saw her. "Or maybe they've finally landed where they were supposed to be," Isabella replied, studying the man who'd once tried to destroy everything she'd built. "The community meeting is tonight. They'll vote on whether to let you stay." "Why are you helping me?" Blackstone asked, setting down his tools. "I tried to ruin you." "Because I remember being at the top of that corporate mountain, Richard. I remember the isolation, the paranoia, the constant fear that showing any weakness would destroy you. You weren't evil. You were trapped in a system that rewards cruelty and calls it strength." That evening, the community center was packed beyond capacity. Blackstone stood before his former victims, no longer the sharp-suited executive, but a humbled man in borrowed clothes. Agnes Wheeler, as the eldest, spoke first. "You came here to destroy our homes," she said bluntly. "Give us one good reason why we should let you stay." Blackstone looked around the room, his gaze landing on Eli, who held Will while Mia sat beside him taking notes for her senior thesis on community justice. "I can't give you a good reason," Blackstone said finally. "I can only tell you that I've lost everything I thought mattered and discovered it never mattered at all. My ex-wife sent me a video of my kids last week. They were happier than I'd ever seen them, playing in their grandfather's yard, free from the pressure of being a corporate dynasty's heirs. That's when I understood what Miss Hart, Mrs. Thompson, gave up. Not money, but the prison money builds around you." Jack Carter stood up, surprising everyone. "I've opposed pretty much everything that's happened in this valley for the past year," he said. "Fought Isabella, fought the trust, fought the development. But if she could forgive me, if this community could keep faith with someone as bitter as I've been, then maybe we can take a chance on him too. People change. I'm living proof. The vote wasn't unanimous, it never was in Cedar Valley, but it was decisive. Blackstone could stay, working at the Peterson farm that desperately needed help. Old Jim Peterson had lost his son in Afghanistan and his wife to grief, managing alone for 5 years. He needed someone who could learn the work and eventually take over. "Don't make me regret this," Jim told Blackstone gruffly. "I'm taking a chance on you because they took a chance on me when I was drowning in a bottle after my boy died." As the meeting dispersed, Isabella noticed her father's car parked outside, the same luxury sedan he'd arrived in for her wedding. William Hart sat behind the wheel, watching the community center but not getting out. She handed Will to Eli and walked over. "Couldn't bring yourself to come in?" she asked through the window. Her father looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper. "I came to see if it was real. This life you've chosen." "And?" "Your mother would have been proud," he said quietly, the first time he'd mentioned her mother in years. "She grew up on a farm, did you know that? I made her hide it, pretend she came from money. I was so ashamed of anything that wasn't polished, profitable, perfect. I know, Dad. I destroyed that part of her, made her into something she wasn't. I won't do that to you." He handed her an envelope. "Your mother left you something. I was supposed to give it to you when you found your true path. I thought that meant when you made your first billion. I was wrong." Inside was a deed to a small farm in Vermont and a letter in her mother's handwriting. Isabella read it by the dome light, tears streaming down her face. "My dearest Isabella," it read, "if you're reading this, you've discovered what I lost the courage to fight for. A life of meaning over money, community over corporation. The farm is small, but it connects to what your father never understood. We are earth before we are anything else, and to earth we return. Plant something there for me. Love, Mom." William Hart drove away without another word, but Isabella saw him wipe his eyes as he left. She stood in the parking lot holding her mother's letter when Eli found her. "You okay?" She showed him the deed. "My mother owned a farm. She never told me." "What will you do with it?" What she asked. "Plant something. Maybe it could be the trust's first expansion out of state." The next months were a blur of growth and challenge. The congressional bill's passage meant sudden influxes of funding, most of which had to be carefully managed to avoid the corruption that often came with government money. Isabella, still recovering from childbirth while managing a baby and the exponentially growing trust, relied heavily on the team that had formed around her. Rebecca Chen's documentary had been nominated for an Academy Award, bringing even more attention. The sustainable living community was thriving, with the retirees becoming integral parts of the farming operations. The Johnsons had started a program teaching urban kids about agriculture, bringing in students from Chicago for summer programs. But it was Blackstone's transformation that became one of the most powerful stories. Under Jim Peterson's gruff guidance, he learned to wake before dawn, to read the weather and cloud formations, to understand soil by its feel. His soft hands became calloused, his expensive shoes replaced by work boots that he patched rather than replaced. 3 months into his apprenticeship, a crisis tested his newfound commitment. Jim Peterson collapsed in the field, a massive heart attack that required immediate surgery. With no family nearby and the farm's animals needing daily care, Blackstone had to step up. Isabella found him one evening, exhausted and covered in mud, trying to deliver a calf that was coming out wrong. He was on the phone with the vet, following instructions with shaking hands. "Turn it clockwise," the vet was saying. "Gently. You need to realign the shoulders." "I can't," Blackstone gasped. "I'll hurt it." Isabella rolled up her sleeves. "Together, then." They worked through the night, Isabella remembering the lessons from her grandfather's stories, Blackstone following her lead. When the calf finally emerged, alive and healthy, both of them were crying. "6 months ago, I was orchestrating hostile takeovers," Blackstone said, watching the calf take its first wobbling steps. "Now I'm crying over a baby cow." "Which moment feels more real?" Isabella asked. "This one. God help me, this one." Jim Peterson recovered but could no longer handle the physical demands of farming. In a move that shocked everyone, including Blackstone himself, he officially made Richard his heir, adopting him as the son he'd lost, giving him both the family and the land he'd never expected to have again. Summer brought its own challenges when a drought threatened to return. The new irrigation systems held, but water rights became contentious as upstream commercial farms began diverting more than their share. It would take legal action to stop them, but the trust funds were committed to expansion. "We need a lawyer," Tom Morrison said at an emergency meeting, "a good one who understands both water rights and corporate law." Agnes Wheeler cleared her throat. "What about him?" She pointed at Blackstone, who was attending his first meeting as a full community member. Everyone stared. Blackstone looked shocked. "I haven't practiced law in years. I went straight into corporate management." "But you have a law degree," Agnes pressed. "Harvard, wasn't it?" "Yale," he corrected automatically, then flushed. "But water rights are completely different from corporate law." "So learn," Eli said simply. "You learned to farm." Blackstone spent the next weeks buried in law books, with Agnes Wheeler as his unlikely assistant, her late husband's legal background proving invaluable. Together, they built a case that not only protected Cedar Valley's water rights, but established precedent for small farm coalitions throughout the state. The day they won the injunction, the entire valley celebrated. But it was the photograph of Blackstone and Agnes Wheeler, the former corporate raider and the 94-year-old farm widow, high-fiving outside the courthouse that went viral, becoming another symbol of Cedar Valley's transformation. Mia graduated as valedictorian that spring, her speech focusing on the intersection of tradition and innovation, using her family's story as the example. "My mother taught me that strength comes from roots," she said, looking at Eli and Isabella in the front row. "My father showed me that those roots can support new growth. And my stepmother proved that sometimes the best fertilizer for growth is everything you're willing to leave behind." She left for college in the fall, the first Thompson to do so, carrying with her not shame about her farming background, but pride in it. Her departure left a hole in the farmhouse that even baby Will's growing presence couldn't fill. "It's too quiet," Eli said one evening, standing in Mia's empty room. "She'll be back," Isabella assured him. "This land is in her blood now." "Like it's in yours?" Isabella thought about that. 5 years ago, she'd never have imagined dirt under her fingernails would feel normal, that the smell of hay would mean home, that watching clouds for rain signs would become second nature. "More than in my blood, in my bones." That fall, an unexpected visitor arrived. Marcus Chen himself, now in his 80s, came to see what his intervention had helped create. He walked the fields with Isabella, leaning heavily on a cane but sharp-eyed as ever. "I knew your grandfather," he said suddenly, stopping by the oak trees Eli's ancestors had planted. "We served on a committee together about sustainable farming back when everyone thought we were crazy for worrying about industrial agriculture. He never mentioned you. We lost touch after he lost the farm. I think he was ashamed. I tried to help, but he was too proud to accept it." Chen touched one of the old trees. "Pride and farming don't mix well. The land doesn't care about your ego." "Is that why you helped us? To honor his memory?" "Partially. But mostly because you did something I've never seen in 40 years of corporate leadership. You chose meaning over money without being forced to. You jumped before you were pushed." Chen stayed for a week, helping refine the trust's expansion plans. He also brought news that shocked everyone. He was leaving his own fortune to the trust, nearly $1 billion that would fund operations for the next century. "I have no heirs who need it," he explained. "Rebecca makes her own way. My ex-wives are well provided for. This money came from agriculture. It should return to it." The announcement brought another wave of media attention and, with it, unexpected criticism. Environmental groups accused the trust of not going far enough in sustainable practices. Corporate agriculture lobbyists pushed for investigations into their nonprofit status. Some farmers in other states resented Cedar Valley's success, claiming they were getting preferential treatment. Isabella was in the trust office, responding to the 100th critical email of the day when she heard shouting outside. A group of protesters had arrived, carrying signs reading "Corporate Farming in Disguise" and "Greenwashing Agriculture." She walked out to meet them, Will on her hip. He went everywhere with her now, a toddler who was as comfortable in boardrooms as barnyards. The protest leader, a young woman named Diana, stepped forward aggressively. "You're just another rich person playing farmer," Diana accused. "This whole trust is just a tax shelter for wealthy donors like Chen." Before Isabella could respond, Jack Carter appeared, along with Tom Morrison, the Hendersons, and what seemed like half the valley. "You want to know what she is?" Jack said loudly. "I'll tell you. 5 years ago, I was ready to put a gun in my mouth. Lost my farm, my family, everything. This woman, who I fought every step of the way, helped me anyway. Now I've got my land back, my kids visit, and I wake up with purpose instead of despair." One by one, farmers told their stories. Beth Henderson talked about keeping land that had been in her family for generations. Tom Morrison described watching his son return from the city to take over the farm because it was finally profitable. Even Blackstone spoke, his transformation from corporate predator to community member stunning the protesters into silence. Diana, the protest leader, listened to it all, then said quietly, "We've been fighting corporate agriculture so long, we didn't recognize when. Someone was actually on our side." "Then help us," Isabella said simply. "We need environmental advocates, people who will keep us honest, push us to do better. Join the advisory board. Be the voice that makes sure we never become what we fought against." It was a risk, inviting critics inside, but it was the Cedar Valley way, turning opponents into allies, critics into collaborators. Winter came early that year, catching everyone off guard. An ice storm in November destroyed power lines, leaving half the valley without electricity or heat. The community response was immediate and organized. Generators shared, families doubling up, the community center becoming an emergency shelter. But it was what happened next that showed how far they'd come. The retirees from the sustainable living community, many with resources from their former careers, immediately offered to fund emergency infrastructure improvements. The trust organized work crews. Within a week, they'd begun installing buried power lines and backup systems that would prevent future outages. "This is what community looks like," Rebecca Chen said, having returned to film a follow-up documentary. "Not just helping in crisis, but building to prevent the next one." Her cameras captured something else, too. The quiet romance blooming between Mia, home for winter break, and James Morrison, Tom's son, who'd returned to take over the family farm. They'd known each other all their lives, but college had given Mia new eyes to see the boy who'd become a man committed to the land. "Absolutely not," Eli said when he figured it out. "She's too young." "She's the same age you were when you met Mom," Isabella pointed out gently. "That's different. Because she's not your little girl anymore." She's a woman making her own choices. Eli struggled with it, but when he saw how James looked at Mia, with the same devotion he'd shown Sarah, the same protective love, he began to soften. Spring arrived with news that would change everything once again. The trust model had been so successful that the United Nations wanted to adapt it for developing nations facing agricultural crisis. They wanted Isabella to lead an international initiative. She sat at the kitchen table, reading the offer while Will played with blocks at her feet. Eli was in the field, visible through the window, checking the young corn that pushed through the soil. Everything she'd built, everything she'd become, was rooted here. But the chance to save farms globally, to spread Cedar Valley's model worldwide? "You're going to do it," Agnes Wheeler said. She'd let herself in, as was her habit, and stood reading over Isabella's shoulder. "It's what you're meant to do." "I can't leave." "Will's too young. The trust needs to spread its wings, and so do you. Take the baby, take Eli when he can come, but take the job. You didn't save this valley to stop here." That evening, Isabella and Eli walked their land, Will toddling between them, his chubby hands gripping theirs for balance. They stopped at the oak trees, their spot, where so many decisions had been made. "It would mean traveling," Isabella said. "Being away sometimes. Building something even bigger than what we have here." "Sarah used to say that love isn't about keeping someone in one place," Eli replied. "It's about being their safe place to return to." "Cedar Valley will always be your home, Izzy, but your work isn't done." "Our work," she corrected. "Our work," he agreed. The announcement of Isabella's appointment made international news. The woman who'd given up billions to save American farms would now try to save farms worldwide. The ceremony was held in Cedar Valley, with dignitaries from dozens of countries coming to the place where it all started. William Hart attended, sitting in the back, still uncomfortable but present. He'd started visiting the Vermont farm, Isabella learned, planning to restore it in honor of his wife's memory. Marcus Chen, despite his age, gave a speech that brought the audience to tears. "We live in an age where success is measured in quarters, where growth must be infinite, where land is commodity." Isabella Thompson proved another way is possible. Where success is measured in generations, where growth is sustainable, where land is community. But it was Agnes Wheeler who stole the show. 95 now and still sharp, she was wheeled to the podium by Blackstone, who'd become her unofficial adopted son. "Folks keep calling this a miracle," she said, her voice carrying despite her age. "It's not. It's work. Hard, daily, unsexy work. It's choosing community over comfort, future over present, we over me. Anyone can do it. The miracle is that someone finally did." The ceremony ended with a barn dance, international dignitaries learning square dancing from local farmers, languages mixing, laughter universal. Isabella danced with Eli, with Will between them, the boys shrieking with joy at the music and movement. Rebecca Chen filmed it all, the final scenes of her sequel documentary. But she captured something more intimate too, a quiet moment when the party had moved outside for fireworks. Isabella stood alone for a moment, looking out over the fields that had been dying when she'd arrived and now thrived. Blackstone approached, 2 glasses of Agnes's homemade wine in hand. "Any regrets?" he asked, the same question Eli had posed years earlier. Isabella took the glass, thinking, "I regret how long it took me to understand what matters. I regret the years I spent building wealth instead of worth, but mostly I'm grateful." "For what?" "For falling off that cliff. For Eli pulling me up. For a community that taught me that saving someone isn't a debt to be repaid, but a gift to be passed forward." Fireworks exploded overhead, illuminating the valley in brief, brilliant light. Will had fallen asleep in Eli's arms, exhausted from the excitement. Mia and James were dancing, lost in each other. Agnes Wheeler was holding court, telling stories to fascinated diplomats. The farmers and the retirees, the locals and the visitors, all mingled as equals. "This is your legacy," Blackstone said. "Not the trust, not the international program, but this, people believing they can change, that community matters, that the impossible is just hard work waiting to happen." Isabella watched her son sleep in her husband's arms, saw her stepdaughter in love, observed her neighbors and former enemies now friends, and felt the kind of wealth that no bank could measure. The international program would launch soon. She'd travel to Kenya, India, Brazil, teaching what Cedar Valley had taught her. But she'd always return here, to this valley that had saved her as much as she'd saved it. As the party wound down and people began heading home, Isabella and Eli stood together in their field. The corn was knee-high already, reaching for stars hidden by fireworks smoke. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. There would be droughts and storms, conflicts and setbacks. But tonight, Cedar Valley stood as proof that sometimes, when someone falls off a cliff and someone else pulls them up, the result isn't just rescue, but redemption. Not just for one person, but for an entire community that learns, in the act of saving, how to be saved themselves. "Ready to save the world?" Eli asked, pulling her close. "I already did," Isabella replied, gesturing to the valley around them. "Now I'm just going to teach others how to save their own." They walked back to the farmhouse hand in hand, their son sleeping between them, their daughter's laughter echoing from where she said goodnight to James. The oak trees stood sentinel, witnesses to all that had changed and all that had endured. In the morning, there would be chores and challenges, meetings and milestones. But tonight, under the vast sky of Cedar Valley, a former billionaire and a struggling farmer had found something worth more than all the money in the world: a home, a purpose, and a love that transformed not just two lives, but an entire community's future. The moon rose over fields that whispered with growing corn, and somewhere in the distance, a screech owl called. Not a scream of distress this time, but a sound of life continuing, persisting, thriving against all odds. Just like Cedar Valley itself, saved by an accident that turned out to be destiny, by a fall that became a rise, by a woman who gave up everything and gained the world.